It wasn't like he was throwing tantrums or tossing props around in frustration. Ron Howard, often hailed as America's most beloved director, had a different kind of temperament. He once said, "I'm living my dream, and it's a great feeling." That freckle-faced kid from the Andy Griffith Show grew up to make that dream a lifelong reality, becoming one of Hollywood's most consistent and admired filmmakers. She spots Chai and suddenly her emotions just overflow. For more than 50 years, Howard has earned the label of Hollywood's genuine nice guy, dependable, encouraging, and a collaborator who brings out the best in others. Yet beneath that easygoing smile and famously calm nature lies another chapter of his story. Even the gentlest man in Hollywood reaches a limit. Howard doesn't yell, slam doors, or storm off a set. His method of leadership is thoughtful, composed, and grounded in mutual respect. He's long believed that the best performances come from actors who show up with both skill and humility, which is exactly why some partnerships challenged him far more than anyone expected. To Howard, those clashes became more than difficulties, they became lessons. From his days as Opie in The Andy Griffith Show to commanding massive Hollywood productions, he faced actors who tested every bit of his patience. Some brought turbulence to his otherwise organized sets. Others confused arrogance for artistry, while a few simply failed to meet the quiet professionalism he required. These weren't minor disagreements. They were deeper creative rifts that lingered well after filming ended, shaping his approach to casting for years to come. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on those buried frustrations, the hidden tensions that prove even Hollywood's calmest director has his breaking point. Howard reportedly struggled to work with. Number 6. Andy Griffith. Howard's reputation has always been built on kindness and respect. Whether or not Griffith ever trained formally, he developed his own rhythm and unique style. Howard wasn't one for outbursts or grudges, but his early years in Mayberry told a different story. Behind the scenes, the man who played America's favorite sheriff didn't always live up to the role. At 6 years old, Ron Howard walked onto the set of The Andy Griffith Show full of wonder, playing Opie Taylor, the sheriff's son. Audiences adored him as the red-headed boy of Mayberry. At first, Griffith felt like a mentor, someone who treated young Ron like an equal, not a prop. Howard once recalled in a 1982 interview, "He made me feel like I belonged." But growing up also meant seeing through the illusion. The sunny world of Mayberry often masked something more complicated. As the show entered later seasons, tension on set grew heavier. Griffith became irritable and controlling under the weight of stardom. Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, disliked him. Don Knotts loved him, but feared his temper. Ron learned to navigate that atmosphere with quiet awareness. By the final years, teenage Howard began questioning storylines and character choices. Rather than encourage him, Griffith's reaction was sharp and defensive, a moment that shattered Ron's childhood image of the patient sheriff. Griffith didn't like being challenged, not even by his on-screen son. You learn early to handle strong personalities, especially when charm can switch on and off between takes, Howard reflected decades later. After the show ended, their contact dwindled to almost nothing. They never worked together again, rarely appeared publicly side by side, and kept their relationship strictly professional. When Griffith died in 2012, Howard's tribute was polite, but notably restrained. That early experience shaped Howard's rule as a director, that the warmth on camera should always be genuine off camera too. On his sets, consistency and respect weren't optional, they were essential. Number 5. Tom Sizemore. Howard never led through fear. His calm direction and meticulous preparation made his sets efficient and trusting environments. He often said great performances depend as much on self-control as on talent, which is why his time working with Tom Sizemore became one of his toughest challenges. Directing Sizemore wasn't just a job, it was an exercise in restraint. In 1996, Howard directed Ransom, a tense thriller starring Mel Gibson and Rene Russo. Everything about the production looked perfect on paper, until Sizemore entered the picture. He was brilliant, intense, and ideal for the role, but unpredictable behind the camera. Sizemore's off-screen volatility quickly became a problem. Rumors about erratic behavior followed him, and crew members recalled his late arrivals and unstable energy. Scenes dragged on, not from forgotten lines, but because his unpredictable intensity threw off the flow. For Howard, who prized order and trust, it was like directing inside a storm. Years later, Howard admitted, "Some days I had to rebuild the entire rhythm around one person's instability. That's not how I like to work." The tipping point came during a critical scene when Sizemore's behavior disrupted the entire set, forcing Howard to halt filming. He didn't explode or shout, he simply shut everything down, quietly reasserting control. Crew members remembered the moment as calm but final. When Tom Sizemore died in 2023, Howard made no comment. Even Hollywood's most forgiving director knows some bridges are best left uncrossed. Number 4. Shelley Long. Howard always valued harmony above all. As a director, he thrived on cooperation, ensuring every actor felt secure enough to take creative risks. His sets were calm, his direction patient, and his focus unwavering. But in 1982, that balance was about to be tested. The film Night Shift marked Ron Howard's first major studio effort, a quirky comedy led by Henry Winkler and an emerging Michael Keaton. For the young filmmaker, barely out of his 20s, the pressure couldn't have been greater. Everything depended on keeping the production steady. Then came Shelley Long. She had just stepped out of television fame, not yet the breakout star Cheers would soon make her. On the surface, she fit the part flawlessly, sharp, engaging, and able to balance charm with edge. But tension rose almost instantly. Crew members later described her method as rigid and exacting, while Michael Keaton thrived on playful improvisation, injecting energy into every scene. Long, on the other hand, preferred control, demanding precision with each take. For Howard, the contrast was impossible to miss. What he envisioned as a smooth, creative environment became a daily act of mediation, trying to balance Long's strictness with his cast's spontaneity. This became his first serious test behind the camera, shaping how he'd manage strong personalities throughout his career. The disagreements with Shelley Long were far from simple creative differences. She questioned staging choices, disputed rewrites, and dissected nearly every scene for motivation and tone. In a 2006 reflection, Howard chose his words carefully. Some performers, he said, arrive certain of how things should be, leaving no room for discovery. That kind of certainty, he noted, can crush spontaneity when the goal is to capture something alive on screen. The tipping point came during a crucial scene, when Long reportedly stopped production for hours, demanding changes. Witnesses recalled Howard's quiet frustration. He never lost his temper, but his demeanor made it clear he was finding ways to work around her, not through her. From Long's perspective, however, it wasn't conflict, it was commitment. In a 1995 interview, she defended her methods, saying, "I come prepared. I always do. Some directors see questions as defiance." To her, Howard's easygoing process felt careless, even amateurish. Howard, meanwhile, walked away with a lasting insight. Collaboration mattered more than control, and Long represented the exact energy he hoped to avoid on future projects. Number 3. Russell Crowe. Ron Howard has always been known as the calm center of chaos, the steady hand that keeps productions on track. His sets function with quiet discipline, marked by his patience and understated authority. He was the anchor everyone relied on, which made his collaboration with Russell Crowe on A Beautiful Mind so unforgettable. At first glance, the pairing looked ideal. Howard's composed style and Crowe's ferocious talent seemed destined for awards glory, and indeed, the film claimed Best Picture. But beneath the acclaim, Howard found himself facing an intensity he hadn't encountered before.
Crowe's portrayal of John Nash remains iconic, yet for Howard, the journey was more about surviving the storm than savoring the success. Those who worked on set recalled Crowe treating each day like a confrontation, not with people, but with the filmmaking itself. He challenged dialogue, questioned camera placements, and dissected every piece of direction as if testing its truth. What should have been a seamless production often turned into a series of battles of will. Russell was extraordinary, said one assistant director, but he made every scene harder than it had to be. Ron had to channel his passion just to keep things moving. Howard later told The Hollywood Reporter, "With some actors, you guide the scene. With Russell, you just hang on." The tension wasn't ego-driven, but philosophical. Crowe viewed Howard's collaborative nature as a risk to the authenticity he chased. In 2004, he made his stance clear. "I'm not there to be liked. I'm there to find truth. If that causes friction, fine." When asked about Howard directly, Crowe's response was polite, but pointed. Howard's a thoughtful filmmaker, but sometimes he aims for too much polish. Real art isn't tidy. The movie went on to greatness, winning Oscars and acclaim, but for Howard, the experience left its mark. He never hired Crowe again. No cameos, no second chances. When asked years later if they'd ever reunite, his answer was measured but firm. Some creative pairings are meant to happen only once. The film endured as a triumph, but the partnership quietly closed. Even for Hollywood's most even-tempered director, some artistic battles come at too high a price.
Number 2. Marlon Brando. By 1995, Ron Howard was presented with what seemed like every director's dream: the opportunity to direct Marlon Brando. The legendary method actor, the face of A Streetcar Named Desire and The Godfather, stood as true Hollywood royalty. For most filmmakers, sharing a set with him would mark the pinnacle of their careers. For Howard, however, it turned into a painful reminder that some icons are better admired from a distance. The film, a dramatic portrait of an aging father confronting his legacy, seemed destined for Oscar glory. On paper, it was pure prestige. In reality, it spiraled into chaos. Insiders described Brando showing up without preparation, refusing to memorize lines, and demanding that his dialogue be written on cards scattered around the set. But that was merely the start. The problem went far beyond his eccentric approach. It was his total disregard for everyone else's time. Brando would disappear without warning, arrive hours late, and demand last-minute script rewrites that threw entire schedules into disarray. What should have been unacceptable soon became the new normal. For Ron Howard, known for his calm leadership and collaborative spirit, the experience was suffocating. He found himself trapped in a film where one actor's ego controlled the production, treating the art of filmmaking as if it were beneath him. The outcome was inevitable. What should have been Howard's crowning achievement became the moment he learned that even the greatest legends can sink a film when professionalism disappears. Crew members still recall the pandemonium clearly. Marlon treated the set like his personal playground, one insider shared. He'd pause scenes mid-take, suddenly decide he wanted a new emotional direction, and force everyone to wait. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be a simple dialogue sequence. Brando repeatedly stopped filming, demanded constant rewrites, and then disappeared for hours. When he finally reappeared, he announced he'd reinvented the character and insisted on restarting from zero. Howard, ever the consummate professional, tried to accommodate Brando's demands while keeping the shoot on track. Yet behind closed doors, frustration boiled over. The disrespect toward the crew, cast, and craft had crossed every boundary. After weeks of turmoil, the production imploded. Though Howard never publicly blamed Brando, Hollywood insiders understood what had happened. Even the industry's most patient director had finally reached his breaking point. Years later, when asked about working with legendary actors, Howard's reply was calm but telling. Some icons earn their legacy through their work, others through their attitude. The trick, he said, is knowing which is which. From Brando's unrestrained chaos to Mel Gibson's overpowering control, Russell Crowe's volatility, Henry Winkler's rivalry, and the lessons from Andy Griffith, Howard's career proves that even the kindest director has fought his share of battles behind the scenes. Behind the image of Hollywood's nicest director lies a tougher truth. Even the most composed leaders can only take so much. For Howard, it was never about pride or resentment. It was about maintaining integrity. Those trials shaped his philosophy: collaboration above conflict, order over disorder, and above all, respect for the art and the people behind it. His struggles weren't born of ego, but of protecting a space where creativity could thrive. That was his code, and not everyone could meet it. So what do you think? Were Howard's standards too demanding, or were these stars simply pushing past the bounds of professionalism? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories and the real price of perfection behind the camera. Number 1. Henry Winkler. In the golden glow of 1970s television, Happy Days looked like the picture of American charm. The entire time I was under contract for Happy Days, my dream was to become a filmmaker, Howard once said. To audiences, the show radiated joy, humor, and friendship. But for Ron Howard, life behind the camera was more complicated. As the clean-cut Richie Cunningham, Howard was intended to be the show's foundation. Yet when Henry Winkler's Fonzie became a cultural sensation, everything changed. The sidekick became the face of the show, and the spotlight that once belonged to Howard began to fade. Industry whispers hinted at rising tension. For Howard, Happy Days was always a stepping stone towards directing. Winkler, meanwhile, embraced his sudden fame, and his creative influence grew until Howard found himself quietly pushed aside. As one writer later observed, Happy Days began as Richie's story, but the audience only wanted the Fonz. And that, for Howard, was a bitter pill to swallow. When the show debuted in 1974, Ron Howard was its beating heart. The wholesome face audiences remembered from his days as Opie Taylor returned to the screen, familiar and steady. Yet before long, Henry Winkler's Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli captured the crowd's imagination. What began as a small side character in a sitcom soon exploded into a pop culture icon draped in leather. As Fonzie's fame soared, the balance behind the scenes began to tilt. Soon, scripts were reshaped around his presence, marketing campaigns showcased him front and center, and studio executives leaned fully into the rebel's unstoppable rise. What had started as Richie Cunningham's coming-of-age story quietly evolved into a showcase for Fonzie in everything but title. Reports from the time described Howard's growing discomfort. Once hired as the show's steady lead, he found himself increasingly pushed to the sidelines. A crew member later summed up the mood without hesitation. The irony cut deep. The clean-cut hero was eclipsed by the rule-breaking outsider. Howard, to his credit, never spoke with bitterness about it, though his words carried an unmistakable honesty. In a 2023 interview, he reflected, "When a character reaches that level of fame, the chemistry changes. You have to adapt to survive." During a rare open conversation in the 1990s, he admitted more directly, "There were moments I wondered where I fit in. I didn't blame Henry, but I did struggle with how the focus drifted away from me." For him, Happy Days became more than a hit show. It became a tough education in how success can shift overnight, and even the main star can lose his spotlight. By the start of the 2000s, Ron Howard's reputation as a dependable Hollywood filmmaker was firmly set. Calm, organized, and trusted with massive productions, he was seen as a stabilizing force in the industry. So when he teamed up with Mel Gibson for Ransom, the collaboration seemed destined for success. Two top-tier professionals tackling a high-stakes thriller. But the partnership that looked perfect on paper soon tested every ounce of Howard's patience. In 1996, Mel Gibson reigned as one of Hollywood's biggest power players. Fresh from his double Oscars for Braveheart, he commanded attention both as an actor and director. Yet the same fierce energy that made him magnetic on screen proved challenging in real life. Those on set remembered how Gibson frequently demanded rewrites, questioned Howard's decisions, and often behaved as if he shared the director's chair. Mel had opinions on everything, one insider recalled, from shot framing to line readings, even down to the food on the set. Howard found himself spending nearly as much energy managing Gibson's creative force as he did directing the film itself.